Have you ever wondered how Catholicism shaped the history of the United States? From the earliest settlers seeking religious freedom to the rise of a Catholic president, from the fight for civil rights to the ongoing battle over the sanctity of life, Catholicism has played a profound role in shaping America's identity. Today, we're diving into 5 pivotal moments in American history where Catholicism left an indelible mark. Let's begin with the journey of the first Catholics to America. Number 1. The first Catholics arrive in America, 1634. In the early 17th century, England was a place of deep religious division. Catholics faced persecution, discrimination, and were often treated as second-class citizens. Many sought a new land where they could worship freely, without fear. In 1634, 2 ships, the Ark and the Dove, set sail across the Atlantic, carrying a group of Catholic settlers led by Lord Baltimore, also known as George Calvert. Their destination? The new colony of Maryland, a place envisioned as a safe haven for Catholics. When they arrived on the shores of the New World, these settlers didn't just step onto a foreign land. They stepped into history. Maryland became the first American colony to grant religious tolerance, allowing people of different faiths to live and worship freely. This bold step laid the foundation for what would later become one of the core principles of the United States: religious liberty. But their journey wasn't easy. Protestants soon became the majority in Maryland, and by the late 1600s, Catholics once again faced restrictions. Their churches were closed, their rights were stripped away, and they were once again forced into the shadows. Yet despite the hardships, Catholicism endured. The faith took root, grew stronger, and over the centuries, Catholics would rise to positions of influence, helping to shape the nation in ways that no one could have predicted back in the 1634. And this was only the beginning. Number 2, the Catholic immigration wave, 19th, early 20th century. As the United States expanded, so did its people. By the 19th century, millions of immigrants were arriving on American shores, searching for new opportunities and a better life. Among them were vast numbers of Catholics from Ireland, Germany, Italy, and Poland. For many of these immigrants, America was a land of hope, but it was also a land of struggle. They arrived poor, uneducated, and often unwelcome. Cities like New York, Boston, and Chicago saw waves of Catholic newcomers crowding into tenement housing, working long hours in factories, and doing the toughest jobs just to survive. But perhaps the greatest challenge they faced wasn't economic, it was religious. Many Protestants viewed Catholics with suspicion, fearing their allegiance to the Pope would make them un-American. Political groups like the Know Nothing Party spread anti-Catholic rhetoric, claiming that Catholics were a threat to democracy. Catholic churches were vandalized, priests were harassed, and entire communities faced discrimination. Yet despite the hostility, Catholics persevered. They built churches, schools, and hospitals, creating strong communities that would shape the cultural and religious landscape of America. The Catholic Church provided not only spiritual guidance, but also social support, helping immigrants transition into American society while holding on to their faith. And over time, their numbers grew. By the early 20th century, Catholicism had become one of the largest religious denominations in the country. No longer just a small minority, Catholics had found their place in America. But their fight for acceptance was far from over. Number 3, the election of John F. Kennedy, 1960. For more than a century, Catholics had struggled to gain full acceptance in American society. But in 1960, everything changed. John F. Kennedy, a young senator from Massachusetts, stood at the brink of history. He was charismatic, intelligent, and inspiring. But for many Americans, he had one major flaw. He was Catholic. No Catholic had ever been elected president of the United States. And for many voters, the idea of a Catholic in the White House was unsettling. Would he take orders from the Pope? Would he prioritize his faith over the Constitution? These fears were so widespread that Kennedy was forced to address them head-on. In a historic speech to the Greater Houston Ministerial Association, Kennedy made his position clear. "I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democratic Party's candidate for president, who happens also to be a Catholic. I do not speak for my church on public matters, and the church does not speak for me." His words resonated. He assured Americans that his loyalty was to the nation, not the Vatican. And on November 8, 1960, John F. Kennedy made history as the first Catholic president of the United States. His election was more than just a political victory. It was a turning point for Catholics in America. It shattered a long-standing barrier, proving that faith did not determine one's ability to lead. Yet just 3 years later, his life was tragically cut short. But even in death, his legacy endured. Kennedy's presidency had shown the world that America was truly a land where anyone, regardless of religion, could rise to the highest office in the nation. Number 4. Catholicism and the Civil Rights Movement, 1960s. By the 1960s, the United States was at a crossroads. The Civil Rights Movement was sweeping across the nation, challenging racial injustice and demanding equal rights for all Americans. While much of the movement was led by Black Protestant leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Catholic Church also played a crucial role in the fight for justice. Catholic priests, nuns, and laypeople marched alongside civil rights activists, risking their lives to stand against segregation and discrimination. Some Catholic bishops spoke out forcefully against racism, condemning it as a moral evil. In the South, where segregation was deeply rooted, many Catholic schools took a bold stand by integrating their classrooms, sometimes before public schools did. One of the most powerful moments of Catholic involvement in the Civil Rights Movement came in 1965 during the Selma to Montgomery marches. Priests and nuns from all over the country, wearing their religious habits, walked side by side with protesters, facing police brutality and violent mobs. When one white priest, Father James Reeb, was beaten to death by segregationists, his martyrdom became a rallying cry for justice. However, not all Catholics supported the movement. Some, particularly in the South, resisted change. But the Church's official stance was clear. Racial equality was not just a political issue. It was a moral one. The Civil Rights Movement strengthened the Catholic Church's commitment to social justice, a commitment that continues to influence its teachings and activism today. Number 5. Papal visits to America and their global impact. Throughout history, the Pope has been a spiritual leader for millions, but his influence extends beyond the walls of the Vatican. When a Pope visits a country, it's more than just a religious event, it's a global moment. And for American Catholics, these visits have been powerful milestones that shape both faith and society. The first ever papal visit to the U.S. came in 1965, when Pope Paul VI addressed the United Nations, calling for peace during the Cold War. But it was Pope John Paul II who truly left a lasting mark. His visits in 1979, 1987, and 1995 were met with millions of faithful pouring into stadiums, streets, and parks just to catch a glimpse of him. His message? Defend human dignity, stand up for the poor, and never lose faith. Pope Benedict XVI continued this legacy in 2008, confronting the Church's abuse crisis head-on and calling for healing and reform. Then in 2015, Pope Francis captivated the nation with his message of compassion, justice, and care for the environment. His speech before Congress, where he urged leaders to protect the vulnerable, welcome immigrants, and care for our common home, resonated across political and religious lines. Each papal visit was more than just a celebration for Catholics. It was a reminder that faith has a role in shaping the moral conscience of a nation. And each time a pope stepped onto American soil, he left behind a message that echoed far beyond the Catholic Church.